steps. Step number one, they're going to confiscate your assets through inflation. The government, your drunk, insolvent Uncle Sam, is in massive debt, almost 25 trillion, maybe even more. Editor, go ahead and throw up the debt clock really quick. So there's nobody that wants inflation more than the government and your drunk, insolvent Uncle Sam. In fact, he's holding a sign that actually says, "I heart inflation." And you better believe he does, because he can only default or inflate his way out of the problem. So you are right here. Temporarily, you've got a big smile on your face because you've saved your money. You've worked your butt off to acquire some assets, real estate, your 401k, and some gold and precious metals. So let's say that right now you've got $50,000 in real estate, $25,000 in stocks, $25,000 gold, precious metals, which equal a $100,000 portfolio. Right now, your $100,000 portfolio represents this many goods and services. It's important. We're going to key on that in just a moment. But the government comes in and the Fed, they print up all this funny money, which creates inflation. Well, over a long period of time, let's say they create so much inflation that the real estate you have goes to $500,000 in price, the stocks $250,000, the gold, precious metals $250,000. So you may be saying to yourself, well, George, that's fantastic. I just got rich. But what you're not realizing is they just went up in nominal terms. They went up with the rate of inflation. So your purchasing power, the amount of goods and services you can buy with your money, with your portfolio, is still identical. It hasn't changed. But what has changed is now you have to pay a capital gains tax because your portfolio nominally went from 100,000 to 1 million. So let's just say that now the capital gains tax is around 40%. It goes to income, which I think it most likely will in the next 5 years. So you would have a $400,000 tax bill that would go up to pay for your drunk, insolvent Uncle Sam's profligate spending, which would leave you with $600,000. But remember, the amount of goods and services you can buy didn't change at all. So basically, you're giving 40% of your assets, or 40% of your current purchasing power, directly to the government as a result of inflation. Step number two. The second way the government is going to steal your money is by paying you less in the future. There's several benefits that are tied to the rate of inflation, such as Social Security payments, payments for military, retirees, and government workers. Well, this goes up, or it's supposed to go up, with the rate of inflation. But recently, the government has proposed to change the methodology for measuring the inflation for these payments. They've suggested to go from the CPIU, which is currently what they use, to the CCPIU. What this means is over time, inflation is downplayed. The rate of inflation isn't as high as it otherwise would be. Well, if the rate of inflation they're measuring is lower, that means the amount of money they're paying you is a lot lower as well. So the easy takeaway here is the CPIU, the way it's measured right now, you're getting close to what you should be getting, and that's debatable. More on that in just a moment. But if they move to a method of measuring inflation that understates it, that means you are going to be getting a lot less in the future. To understand this better, let's go right to shadow stats. This is a chart from 2000 all the way to 2020. In the blue, it's a measurement of inflation as it was measured in the 1990s by the government. In the red, it's how they measure inflation today. And notice you've got about a 2.5% discrepancy between the two. What does this mean specifically for you? If right now you're getting $1,000 a month in payments from Social Security, military retirement, or retirement for government workers, in 20 years at a 2% rate, you'd go from getting $1,000 a month to $1,400 a month. But at a 4.5% rate, a 2.5% difference, you'd go from getting $1,000 to $2,400. So the government, by understating the rate of inflation, will be paying you a lot less money per month. Step number 3, they tax you even more. This is very similar to them paying you less in step number 2, where it's all about the way the government measures inflation. And for the taxes, this has actually gone into law. Went into law in 2018, ironically, when they lowered the overall tax rates. So they have already gone from the CPIU to the CCPIU for the tax brackets. So how does this work? Well, let's say we've got middle class Mike and he's making $50,000 a year. And when you combine all the taxes he pays and the different tax brackets starting from 0 to 10, 10 to 20, and those aren't exact numbers, just using them as an example, his effective tax rate is 10%. So this means he's paying about $5,000 a year in taxes. So his after-tax income would be $45,000, which he can buy this many goods and services with. We've got Richard up here. He's making 100 grand a year, and because we have a progressive tax system, his effective tax rate, his average tax rate, is 20%. So he would be bringing home $80,000 a year after taxes. Of course, his purchasing power, or the amount of goods and services Rich could buy, would be more than Mike. Now let's fast forward 10 years into the future. Mike has gone from making $50,000 a year to $100,000 a year. So you may be saying to yourself, well, that is great news. It's good for Mike. He got a raise. Not really. His wages just went up with the rate of inflation. So his purchasing power really hasn't changed at all. But what happens if the government understates the rate of inflation for moving the tax brackets up? This means that Mike will be paying a larger percentage of his income or purchasing power to the government in taxes. Let's take it to an extreme and say the tax brackets didn't go up at all in these 10 years because the government was understating it, they manipulated it, they changed the methods. Who knows what they'll do to screw over the average Joe and Jane. But let's say the tax brackets didn't go up at all. So Mike would now be paying 20%, just like Richard was 10 years earlier. But instead of making $45,000 a year to buy this much goods and services, Mike would be taxed 20%, so his take-home would be $80,000, but the $80,000 would only buy $40,000 worth of goods and services now. So although Mike was making the exact same amount of money in real terms, adjusted for inflation, his purchasing power went down. He paid more of his income to drunk, insolvent Uncle Sam. Whoa, time out. Let me go over this in a slightly different way just to make sure that everyone is understanding the scam the government is trying to pull. They're really trying to pull the wool over your eyes with this tax bill that went into effect in 2018. So if we're in the year 2000, Mike is making $45,000 after taxes. In the year 2010, Mike is making $80,000 a year after taxes. But when you adjust for inflation and look at it in terms of the year $2000, so we're comparing apples to apples, Mike's after-tax income is only $40,000, $5,000 less than it was 10 years earlier, although his income in nominal terms, not adjusted for inflation, has actually doubled. The bottom line is the government is going to steal your money by creating inflation, understating that inflation in order to take your assets, pay you less, and tax you more. For more content that'll help you build wealth and thrive in a world of out-of-control central banks and big governments, check out this playlist right here, and I will see you on the next video.